All right, so we're diving into carbon footprint calculators today. You
Yeah.
know those online tools that try to tell you how much your lifestyle, is impacting the planet?
Right. Yeah.
We're going to go a little deeper than just the basic reduce, reuse, recycle stuff, though. We've got some research and personal reflections about a particular calculator from the Global Footprint Network.
Yeah, and it gets pretty thought-provoking.
It does. It really does.
This calculator frames your impact in a very interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
It tells you how many Earths we'd need if everyone lived exactly like you.
Oh, wow.
Which is a
Yeah.
very interesting way to think about it.
It is. I mean, I try to be conscious of my choices, but, seeing it boil down to needing X number of Earths is like,
Yeah.
that's impactful. But how does it actually work? What's going on behind the scenes?
So the calculator looks at three main categories: food, housing, and transportation. And within those categories, it looks at the resources you use and the waste you produce. And you can choose to give detailed answers or keep it more general, depending on how much time you want to spend.
Gotcha.
It uses all of that information to basically estimate your ecological footprint.
Right.
And then it compares that to the Earth's biocapacity, which is its ability to regenerate resources and absorb waste.
So it's not just about my personal actions. It's
No.
about how those actions stack up against
Exactly
what the
right.
planet can handle.
Yeah, it helps you understand your impact in the context of planetary boundaries.
Right. That makes sense. The author of one of our sources mentioned feeling guilty after seeing the results. Have you ever experienced that?
I think that sense of guilt is a natural reaction when we see that discrepancy between our aspirations and our actual impact. It's like that moment of self-consciousness that George H. Mead talked about, where we see ourselves as objects,
Mm-hmm.
comparing our actions to a larger social group. And I think this calculator is kind of holding a mirror up to our environmental selves and saying, how do your choices compare? Are you doing your part? And for a lot of people, that can be an uncomfortable realization.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about the number itself. It's about how that number makes us feel. And it makes me wonder, what kind of messaging is actually effective when it comes to motivating people to make more sustainable choices?
That's a really great question. The research we're looking at actually criticizes the typical approach of relying on, guilt or social pressure to motivate people to act more sustainably.
Yeah.
And it argues that we need to move beyond those external motivators and tap into something deeper,
Mm-hmm.
what the field psychology calls intrinsic motivation.
Intrinsic motivation. So
Yeah.
doing things because we genuinely believe in them,
Exactly.
not just because we feel like we should or because we want to impress other people.
Yeah, it's about aligning our actions with our values.
Right. But how do you cultivate that, especially around such a big, complex issue like climate change?
It's a great question, and our sources suggest that we need to get more creative.
Okay. Well, one of the sources brings up a pretty wild example, the nosedive episode of Black Mirror. Have you seen that one?
Oh yeah, I have.
For those who haven't seen it, it's a world where your social media ranking determines every aspect of your life.
Mm-hmm.
What does that have to do with sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, it might seem a little extreme, but nosedive very effectively visualizes the potential consequences of our actions in a
Yeah.
very visceral way. And I think that's what's often missing in climate change communication. We hear about rising temperatures and melting ice caps, but it can feel very abstract and distant.
So instead of just throwing facts and figures at people,
Right.
we need to make them feel the impact more directly.
Exactly. The source argues that to really engage people, we need to make the risks and realities of climate change feel approachable and immediately applicable to their lives.
Mhm.
It's about moving beyond the intellectual understanding and tapping into a deeper emotional connection.
Okay.
And I think storytelling can be a really powerful way to do that.
It definitely gives you something to think about. But let's get back to the calculator itself. The sources we have, they offer kind of a balanced view of its strengths and weaknesses. What did you find most interesting about their assessment?
Well, one of the strengths they highlight is the calculator's ability to prompt self-reflection. Even if it doesn't give you specific actions to take, it forces you to confront your own impact in a very quantifiable way.
Right.
And I think that could be a really powerful first step towards change.
Yeah, you get that baseline awareness.
Exactly.
But then the weakness that they point out is,
it's not very actionable.
right,
You get this big number representing your impact.
okay.
But then what? It doesn't necessarily tell you what to do with that information or equip you with the tools or knowledge to actually reduce your footprint.
So awareness is great,
Yes.
but it's only valuable if it leads to concrete action.
Absolutely. And that's where I think the calculator has room for improvement. It needs to bridge that gap between awareness and action by providing users with more personalized guidance and resources. It's interesting to think about how this calculator, like the framing of it, really taps into some of those deeper psychological mechanisms that we were talking about. It's like presenting your impact in terms of Earth's needed
Uh-huh.
really highlights this idea of social comparison.
Right, like, oh, wow, if everyone lived like me, we'd need 3 Earths. Maybe I should rethink some things.
Exactly. And, George H. Mead's work on self-consciousness, I think, is really relevant here.
Okay.
He argued that we develop our sense of self by seeing ourselves as objects and comparing ourselves to others. And I think this calculator is kind of forcing us to confront that comparison in a very tangible way,
Yeah.
which can be uncomfortable,
Uh-huh.
but also motivating.
It makes you wonder if those online communities dedicated to sustainable living are actually tapping into that. People sharing tips, tracking their progress, maybe even a little friendly competition. It's
Yeah.
almost like they're trying to collectively lower their Earth's needed score.
That's a great observation. I think those communities can definitely provide a sense of belonging and shared purpose, which can be really powerful motivators. But I also think they raise some interesting questions about how we present ourselves online.
Oh, you mean like how Irving Goffman talked about impression management?
The exact
Trying to control how others perceive us?
Goffman's work is so relevant here. Think about it. Are people making sustainable choices because they genuinely believe in them? Or are they partly motivated by wanting to project a certain image
Right.
to their online community?
So there's a risk that some of those eco-friendly actions might be more about wanting to, like, fit in or get approval than about a genuine internal motivation.
Yeah, that's the potential downside. It's like greenwashing.
Right.
But on a personal level,
Mm-hmm.
people might be more focused on appearing sustainable than actually making meaningful changes.
It makes you think about those picture-perfect zero-waste Instagram feeds
Right.
or those meticulously documented sustainable travel blogs.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not to say that all of it is inauthentic,
Right.
but it's healthy to be aware of those social dynamics at play
For sure.
and to check in with our own motivations. Are we doing this because we actually care, or are we being influenced by, like, these external pressures?
I think that's such an important point.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder to be mindful and self-reflective, even when it comes to something like sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of reflection, one of the most thought-provoking points I thought in our research was about the need for better visualization when it comes to communicating about climate change.
You mean like moving beyond those abstract statistics and graphs?
Exactly. We're constantly bombarded with data about rising sea levels and greenhouse gas emissions. But it can be really hard to connect with those numbers on an emotional level.
I get that. It's like, yeah, I know the planet is warming, but like,
Right.
what does that actually look like in my everyday life?
Right.
How does it affect me personally?
And that's where visualization can be so crucial. If we can find ways to make the impacts of climate change more tangible and relatable, then it's more likely to spark action.
They keep coming back to that nosedive episode as an example, but there's got to be other ways to make it feel more real.
Absolutely. There are some incredible projects out there that are using art, technology, and storytelling to really bring climate change to life. For example, there's this virtual reality experience that lets you walk through a simulated future city that's been ravaged by climate change. And it's incredibly immersive and impactful.
Wow, that sounds intense.
Yeah,
So you're literally seeing and feeling the potential consequences.
exactly. And it's not about fear-mongering or anything like that.
Right.
It's about creating an emotional connection that goes beyond that intellectual understanding of the issue. There are also projects using augmented reality to show how rising sea levels will impact coastal communities or interactive maps that let you explore the projected effects of climate change on your own neighborhood.
That's amazing. It makes it so much more personal and relevant.
Exactly. And that's the key. We need to find ways to bring climate change home, to make it feel like something that's happening here and now, not some distant future threat.
So instead of just relying on data and reports, we need to engage people's imaginations and emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because when people feel something deeply, they're more likely to act.
The author of one of our sources had a pretty stark realization after using the calculator.
Yeah.
They discovered that the area where they were generating the most CO2 was their home, a whopping 25.1 tons annually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a significant number.
Mhm.
It really highlights how all those seemingly mundane choices about our homes,
Mhm.
our energy use, appliances, heating and cooling systems, all of that can have a major impact on our carbon footprint.
It's a good reminder that sustainability isn't just about, grand gestures,
Right.
like installing solar panels or driving an electric car.
Exactly.
It's about those everyday decisions that when you
Inclusive.
multiply them across millions of households can really add up.
Absolutely. And while this particular calculator might not offer specific advice on how to reduce that footprint,
Yeah.
it definitely sparks that crucial self-reflection.
Right.
It forces you to look at your own habits and consider where you might be able to make changes.
It's that awareness piece again.
Right.
But as we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
awareness alone isn't enough.
It's not.
The calculator could be even more effective
Yeah.
if it gave more tailored recommendations based on your results.
I completely agree. Imagine if the calculator could, analyze your data and say, okay, you have a particularly high carbon footprint in the housing category. Here are some specific actions you can take to reduce it based on your location and lifestyle.
Right, like you live in a sunny climate, so maybe consider solar panels, or you have an older home, so investing in better insulation could make a big difference.
Exactly. Or maybe it could connect you with local organizations that are working on energy efficiency or renewable energy initiatives in your area.
That would be amazing. It would empower people to take concrete action and feel like they're part of a larger solution.
And it would reinforce that idea that we're all in this together. We need systemic change, of course, but individual actions, when multiplied, can really contribute to a more sustainable future.
So it's not about guilt or perfection, but about making conscious choices and taking steps in the right direction.
Exactly. And that's where I think this calculator can be such a valuable tool. It's not about shaming people, but about empowering them to make informed decisions
Yeah.
and become part of the solution.
It's like, all these different approaches we've been talking about with climate change communication.
Mhm.
One thing that I keep thinking about is that idea of making the consequences of our choices
Yeah.
feel more real, more immediate, like a nosedive where every action has like a visible impact on your social standing.
Yeah, it's a really powerful concept, isn't it?
It is.
Like imagine if we had a similar system for our environmental impact.
Oh, wow.
Like what if instead of just seeing a number on a calculator,
Yeah.
we could actually see how our choices affect the world around us in like a visual, visceral way.
It would definitely make you think twice before like mindlessly leaving the lights on.
Right.
Or like ordering takeout with all the extra packaging. But I mean, obviously, we're not advocating for some kind of Orwellian social
Yeah.
credit system
No, of course not.
based on your carbon footprint.
But I think the principle there,
Right.
that visualization can be a really powerful motivator.
Uh-huh.
I think that's something that's worth exploring.
Yeah. How can we do that ethically, though?
Right. That's the question.
In a way that empowers people.
Exactly. It makes me think about those video games where like your choices have consequences that actually ripple out and affect the game world.
Oh, yeah.
What if we could apply that kind of interactive storytelling
Uh-huh.
to climate change?
Well, there are some projects out there that are already doing that, right?
There are some really cool projects.
Sure.
There's this online game where you play as the mayor of a city,
Okay.
and you have to make all these decisions about energy and transportation and waste management,
Wow.
all while trying to keep your citizens happy and the environment healthy.
So you get to see the impact of your choices play out.
Yes, you get to see the direct impact of your choices on this like virtual city.
It's like a simulator for real world decision making.
It is. It's like a simulator.
But you get to like experiment
Right.
without the real world consequences.
Exactly. And it's not just games. There are also immersive art installations that use data visualization to create these stunning representations of climate change. Or like interactive documentaries that let you explore different scenarios and make choices that affect the outcome of the story.
It's like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible
I think so.
with this kind of approach.
Yeah, and I think that's a really exciting takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah.
As you continue to learn about climate change and think about your own role in addressing it,
Mhm.
I think it's important to challenge yourself to think beyond the usual facts and figures. Like, how can we engage our imaginations and our emotions to make this issue feel more personal and urgent?
Yeah, it's not just about understanding the science.
Right.
It's about connecting with the human story behind it.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about finding what sparks that intrinsic motivation within each of us.
Right.
Like, what makes you care about this issue? What kind of future do you want to create?
Uh-huh.
And how can you use your unique skills and passions to make a difference?
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we encourage you to keep exploring these questions.
Yes.
Keep challenging yourself and keep diving deep into the complexities of climate change.
Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. And every step we take, no matter how small, contributes to a healthier planet for ourselves and for generations to come. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.